Sky is so high, if you don't know how to fly, aim feelings here to make you fly. Sky is so high, if you don't know how to fly, aim feelings here to make you fly. Here we go.
Okay, so you are present in the academy right now in Hyderabad?
Here we go.
Okay, fine. So if you have any questions, do you have the modules already? Were the modules
Rise over the
shared with
sky.
you?
Here we go. Send just stand aside.
So you
Yes,
have the
ma'am.
modules.
Hold your heads high.
Perfect. Because I'm going to tell you guys to read today from the module. Okay, this is going to help you with public speaking. It will boost your confidence when it comes to talking and reading. Okay, because tomorrow when you become a crew or a ground staff, you will have to make announcements. So this is also a practice for that. Okay. So I think we will start with the ability-based model. For all the people who were not here for the last class, if you have the module, please go through the module up till here. So if you have any questions, we can do that separately on individual basis, because otherwise it just hampers the entire session of the class, which we only have 2 hours, okay? And we spoke about leadership and how to make friends, what is personality development. Okay, so we spoke about empathy, all that. So just go through the module. There are certain things that you should know, and there are certain things which are good to know. Okay, so don't go too deep into when it comes to what model is. You're not here to become a psychologist. You are here just to understand that. Okay, so don't go too deep into the studying the model. Just get a gist of it for your understanding. Okay, start.
The ability-based model. Salovey and Mayer's conception of EI strives to define EI within the confines of the standard criteria for a new intelligence. Following their continuing research, their initial definition of EI was revised to the ability to perceive emotion, integrate emotion to facilitate thought, understand emotions, and to regulate emotions to promote personal growth.
Okay.
The
Yeah, go ahead.
The ability-based model views emotions as useful sources of information that help one make sense of and navigate the social environment. The model proposes that individuals vary in their ability to process information of an emotional nature and in their ability to relate emotional processing to a wider cognition. This ability is seen to manifest itself in certain adaptive behaviors.
Yes.
The model claims that EI includes 4 types of abilities.
Okay.
First,
Okay, that's it. Okay. Thank you, Sakshi. Okay, so this is another model of emotional intelligence, basically what they're talking. You don't have to memorize this. This is good to know information, but they're just saying what does the emotional intelligence, how do they define Salovey and Mayer, how do they define emotional intelligence? What we read earlier was also emotional intelligence is relatively a very new kind of a study. So there are still things emerging every day. So definition keeps changing from day to day. Okay. So how they describe this is the ability to perceive emotion, integrate emotion to facilitate thought, understand emotions, and to regulate emotions to promote personal growth. So what is perceive emotion? Do you know what perceive means? It's just to become aware. So the ability to become aware of emotions, integrate emotion to facilitate thought, and understand emotions to regulate. Basically, you use your emotions for your personal growth. That is what it means. Okay. Then there are, according to this model of emotional intelligence, there are 4 types of abilities that are needed or that is included in emotional intelligence. First is perceiving emotions. So perceiving emotions basically means to become aware of these emotions. The ability to detect and decipher emotions in faces, pictures, voices, and cultural artifacts, including the ability to identify one's own emotions. So basically, if you know how to detect, decipher. What is decipher? Decipher is basically to, I would say, decode something, to understand a difficult thing and just decode into a simpler language. That is decipher. So the ability to detect, decipher emotions in faces, pictures, voices, and cultural artifacts. So basically, you are reading emotions on others' faces, your faces, in pictures. Sometimes we look at a picture and we try to understand what the picture or the portrait is trying to portray. Basically, we try to read the emotions. So this is also a part of that. Voices. How do we read emotions in voices? Basically, you try to gauge the tone of the person, the volume of the person, and you kind of understand the emotion in that voice, right? You try to read that. You get to know somebody's sad, somebody's happy, somebody's excited. So the tone changes accordingly. And cultural artifacts. What are cultural artifacts? Are things that help you understand a particular culture or a race of people. Basically, if we say this is a Mughal building, or this is a Mughal architecture, or a colonial architecture, so that particular architecture is depicting the colonial or the Mughal era, because it is coming from that culture, that race of people, basically. Okay, so that is called any cultural artifact. It could also be a dance form or a martial art that depicts that particular culture. That would be cultural artifact. Okay, including the ability to identify one's emotions, own emotions. So you are studying emotions in other things, other people, and also to understand your own emotions. It's called perceiving emotions. Okay. Then the second is using emotions. Sorry, we still have one line. Perceiving emotions represents a basic aspect of emotional intelligence, as it makes all other processing of emotional information possible. Okay, so why is perceiving emotions so important? So why is it so important to be aware of the emotions? It is important because until you are not aware of emotions, whether that's your own emotion, it is somebody else's emotion, you will not be able to use that emotion, right? Until you see, if you have a friend who's really upset, you will not be able to help her until you are aware of the fact that she's upset about something, right? Or even your own emotions. You have to be aware of your own emotions for you to act accordingly. So this is so important, is because everything else depends on this. So the second thing is using emotions. The ability to harness emotions to facilitate various cognitive activities such as thinking and problem solving. The emotionally intelligent person can capitalize fully upon his or her changing moods in order to best fit the task at hand. So how do you use these emotions now? So what is a cognitive activity? Is anything of that is related to your thought or your senses. Okay, so basically, how do you use these cognitive activities such as thinking and problem solving? The emotionally intelligent person can capitalize fully upon his or her changing. So how do you use this information that you have about emotional intelligence? How do you use it in daily life? Is basically how you use your emotions, how to ease things. What is facilitate cognitive activities is how you you make it easier to understand, to apply in your daily life. Okay, that is how you use emotions. Then is understanding emotions, the ability to comprehend emotion language and to appreciate complicated relationships among emotions. For example, understanding emotions encompasses the ability to be sensitive to slight variations between emotions and the ability to recognize and describe how emotions evolve over time. So the ability to comprehend emotion language and to appreciate complicated relationships. How sensitive are you towards others' emotions, to your own emotions, is basically you are understanding. If you are sensitive towards emotions, that means you understand emotions, right? And if you understand, only then you can be sensitive. Managing emotions, the ability to regulate emotions in both ourselves and in others. Therefore, the emotionally intelligent person can harness emotions, even negative ones, and manage them to achieve intended goals. So then you've perceived the emotions, you've used the emotions, you've understood the emotions. But how do you manage your emotions? There are people who are really good at it because they've learned it over time. how to manage the emotions. That sometimes you face a lot of negative energies and a lot of negative emotions. So this how you manage your emotions and you reach your goals is basically how you're managing emotions. Everybody does not have to be perfect at it. It comes with time. Everybody forms their own. Everybody has a different way of handling things. Okay, but how do you manage it? Everybody will come. It is a very. It depends on your personality. How you deal with things is basically what is managing emotions. Okay, so then measurement ability based model. Can someone read this out? Okay, maybe can you go ahead, please?
Measurements of the ability-based model. Different models of EI have led to the development of various instruments for the assessment of the construct. While some of these measures may overlap, most researchers agree that they tap slightly different constructs. The current measure of Mayer and Salovey's model of EI, the Mayer-Salovey-Caruso Emotional Intelligence Test (MSCEIT), is based on a series of emotion-based problem-solving items. Consistent with the model's claim of EI as a type of intelligence, the test is modeled on ability-based IQ tests. By testing a person's ability on each of the 4 branches of emotional intelligence, it generates scores for each of the branches as well as a total score. Central to the 4.
Okay, that's it. Thank you. Okay, so it basically is talking about on this model how it measures the emotional intelligence of a person. So the subjects, basically the people who are involved in this examination, they are assessed on these 4 aspects, which is perceiving, using, understanding, and managing emotions. Okay, they are given certain emotion-based problems to solve, and then they are assessed on it. And this test is called MSCEIT, I think. Yeah, MSCEIT. Okay. Then Angom, Pushpa, can you go ahead? Central to 4 branch from there.
Central to the 4 branch model is the idea that EI requires attunement to social norms. Therefore, the MSCEIT is a score in the consensus fashion, with higher scores indicating higher overlap between the individual's answers and those provided by a worldwide sample to respondents. The MSCEIT, okay, yeah, response. The MSCEIT can also be expert score so that the amount of overlap is calculated between an individual's answer and those provided by a group of 21 emotion researchers.
Okay.
Although,
Okay, just stop, Angam. Okay. Thank you. So basically, this is how they read once they've assessed a person on these 4 aspects, how do they read this? Is basically they compare an individual's reading to a group of people to their reading or an expert's reading. So then they compare the readings, is what it is saying. Okay. Angom, go ahead now, please.
although promoted as an ability test, the
MSCIT, yeah.
Yeah, the MSc EIT is the most unlike standard IQ test in that its items do not have objectively correct responses. Among other problems, the consensus scoring criterion means that it's impossible to create items that only a minority of respondents can solve.
Yeah.
Because by definition, responses and are deemed emotionally intelligent only if the majority of the sample has endorsed them. These and other similar problems have led cognitive ability experts to question the definition of EI as a genuine intelligence.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. So in the last class also we read this, why our EI, emotional intelligence readings or tests are never accurate. Okay, so there are always problems with it because they are not black and white. A person's emotions are never black and white, right? So because of various differences, these models can never be accurate. It can never be right or wrong because they depend on the person's emotions, and emotions can vary from a person to person, and even the same person can react to the same situation in a different way depending on his stress, or probably he or she is thinking about something, or they're planning something, so on all these, because so many factors affect a person's emotions, all these readings are always, there's no like right or wrong way of calculating an emotional intelligence of a person, right? So there will always be some kind of problem with these models of assessing a person's emotional intelligence. Okay, in a study by Follisdale, the MSCIT test results of 111 business leaders were compared with how their employees described their leader. It was found that there were no correlations between a leader's test results and how he or she was rated by the employees, with regard to empathy, ability to motivate, and leader effectiveness. Follisdale also criticized the Canadian company Multi Health Systems, which administers the MSCIT test. The test contains 141 questions, but it was found after publishing the test that 19 of these did not give the expected answers. This has led Multi Health Systems to remove answers to these 19 questions before scoring, but without stating it officially. Okay, so this was another study that was done on 111 employees, people of a company, where they were asked to describe their leader basically, and then the leader's emotional intelligence, he was also assessed. So what the employees had told about the leader and what leader had self-assessed himself, the things did not match, because that is their perception and this is his perception, right? So there's always a difference of opinion, a difference in emotion, and that is why these things are not always accurate and they don't always work. Mixed models of EI. Anybody wants to volunteer to read?
Yeah, ma'am, I'll read.
Okay, who's this?
This is Mahir.
Mahir, why is the camera not on? I cannot say this again and again in every class. Okay, this is for everybody because I cannot see everybody on the screen. Yes. Okay, you look fine, Mahir. Go ahead. Read.
So the emotional
Competencies.
is Goleman model. The model introduced by Daniel Goleman focus on EI as a wide array of competencies and skills that drive leadership performance. Goleman's model outlines four main EI constructs. First, self-awareness, the ability to read one's emotion and recognize their impact while using gut feelings to guide decisions. Second, self-management involves controlling one's emotion and impulses and adapting to changing circumstances. Third, social awareness, the ability to sense, understand, and react to others' emotions while comprehending social networks. Fourth, relationship management, the ability to inspire, influence, and develop others while managing conflicts.
Okay, so this is another model now they are talking about, which is called the Goleman model. Goleman model is based on the research that Daniel Goleman did. Okay, so it is based on four aspects again, which is self-awareness. How aware are you about your feelings? Something that we often use in a day-to-day life is, I have this gut feeling, right? A lot of you've heard a lot of people saying that, or probably you've used it. Is how aware, or there are certain things that you feel. How aware are you of your feelings? Then the second is self-management. Involves controlling one's emotions and impulses and adapting to changing circumstances. So we already spoke about this. Is how do you manage your emotions? This is you're facing a certain emotion and circumstances are always changing, right? You're always facing something new, a new challenge today. How do you use those emotions with this changing circumstances to reach your goal is basically self-management. Okay, so you have to channel your emotions in the right way to reach to your final your goals basically. Then is social awareness, the ability to sense, understand, and react to others' emotions while comprehending social networks. So first is self-awareness, that is your emotions. Then social awareness is reading the emotions of people around you, basically the society. And there are a lot of aspects of society. This is socially okay, this is socially awkward. So basically reading others' emotions and then comprehending the social norms. Then there is relationship management, to the ability to inspire, influence, and develop others while managing conflicts. Then there is how you see. If you look at me now, probably I should inspire you. Being your instructor, I should be able to inspire you to be what you want to be, right? I should be able to put you in the right way. Okay, well, right now we are relatively new to each other, but as the course goes ahead, I will get to know you guys better and you will get to know me better, right? So as an instructor, I should be able to guide you to the right way according to your personality and abilities, right? So basically managing relationships. So these are the four things or four aspects on which this model, which is called the Goleman model, is based on. Then it says Goleman includes a set of emotional competencies within each construct of EI. Emotional competencies are not innate talents, but rather learned capabilities that must be worked on and can be developed to achieve understanding performance. So basically he's saying these are not the things that you're born with, but with your experiences and your learnings, you build all these capabilities. So if you think I am not so self-aware, you can work on it and you can build this. I'm not so good at a relationship management. So we all can build this. According to this model, what Goleman says is these are not things that you're born with, but these are just abilities that you can sharpen basically with time if you work on them. Goleman posits sorry, one second. I just have to zoom this. That individuals are born with a general emotional intelligence that determines their potential for learning emotional competencies. Goleman's model of EI has been criticized in the research literature and mere pop psychology. See, so he says there is a certain amount of emotional intelligence that you're born with. On that emotional intelligence that you're born with depends how good will you be at learning all these abilities. Okay? And otherwise, like all the other models, even Goleman's model was criticized by his co-workers, basically psychologists and researchers of that era. Then measurement of the emotional competencies as per the Goleman model. Can Saleha Niazi, can you read this out?
Yes, miss.
Can you switch on your camera, Saleha? Have we met earlier?
No, miss, it is my birthday.
Okay. So I asked at the beginning, did you join a little late?
Yes, miss.
Okay, fine. Can you read for me from the measure? Do you have the module?
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead.
Measurement of the emotional combination Goleman model.
Yes.
The measurement tools are based on the Goleman model. The emotional community increased the EIT, which was created in 1999, and the emotion and social companies
Competency, yeah.
community invested CSTI, which was created in 2007. The emotion integrating
Intelligence.
Integration Exeter, which was created in 2001 and which can be taken as a self-report on 360-degree
Assessment.
component.
Okay, fine. Thank you. So these are the two measurements basically which are taken from the Goleman model, which is called the ECI, ESCI, and this was created in 2007, 2009. These are self-explanatory what they are. And the second is the emotional intelligence appraisal, which was created in 2001 and which was which can be taken as a self-report. So this is a self-assessment. The second part is the self-assessment. You assess yourself. Okay, so all these things, all these models, I just want to tell you, these are all good to know things. Okay, like it's good to help yourself, and you don't have to like memorize all this. Just try and understand all this. Then is the bar. Saliha, can you please put your microphone? Can you switch it off? Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Shweta, can you read from the bar on model of emotional social intelligence?
Sorry, ma'am, I don't have the modules.
Okay, you don't have the module. Okay. So everybody who does not have the module at the end of the class, please let me know so that I can forward the list to Nargis and tell her to send you the modules. Okay. But we'll do that at the end of the class. Okay. So who will read it for then? Rahim?
Yes, ma'am. Sure.
Can you read? Please. Thank you.
The Bar on Model of Emotional Social Intelligence.
Yes.
Bar on defines emotional intelligence as being concerned with effectively understanding oneself and others, relating well to people, and adapting to and coping with the immediate surroundings. To be more successful in dealing with environmental AI over time, and that it can be improved through training, programming, and therapy. Bar on
Hypothesis. Yeah.
hypothesis that
Hypothesis.
hypothesis
Yeah.
that those individuals with higher than average
Emotional quotient.
emotional quotient are in general more successful in meeting environmental demands and pressures. He also notes that the deficiency in EI can mean a lack of success and the existence of emotional problems. Problems in coping with one's environment and thought are thought by bar on to be especially common among those individuals lacking in the subscales of reality testing, problems solving, stress tolerance, and impulse control. In general, bar on considers emotional intelligence and
Cognitive.
cognitive intelligence to contribute equality to person's general intelligence, which then offers an indication of one's potential to succeed in life. However, doubt have been expressed about this model in the research literature, in particular about the validity of self-report as an index of emotional intelligence, and in scientific settings, it is being replaced by the triad EI model discussed below.
Okay, fine. So this is another model which is called the Baron model, in which you basically try to understand yourself and you try to understand others. Okay, and this model also says it has the same. It agrees with the Goldman model on one thing, that emotional intelligence can be built. You're not always born with it, but you can work on this. Okay, so this also says the same thing. Then it says that people with higher emotional quotient are in general more successful in meeting environmental demands. And so he says people who are emotionally more intelligent, they will be more successful in life because they can handle situations better, like problem solving. They are not so impulsive. They can handle high pressure situations better. So this is what this model, the Baron model, says. Again, this model is also criticized by other people in his field. Okay. Then there is that's the end of page 41, right? Page 11, sorry. So any questions so far?
Ma'am, I wanted to know the meaning of cognitive intelligence.
Okay, so what is cognitive is anything that you do based on your thoughts or your senses. So what is that is cognitive knowledge. Okay, your thoughts and senses, if that is your cognitive intelligence. Okay, does that help you? Yes. Okay. Basically, you're trying to understand something based on the thought and the process of thinking. You try to understand and you convert that into knowledge. So you're trying to build your knowledge based on the thoughts and the ability of your senses. That is cognitive intelligence. Okay. Okay. Anything else? Okay. So far we've read the different kind of models that are studies of emotional intelligence. Okay. So then we go on to module 3, which is management skill leadership. We will talk about leadership. We spoke a little bit about leadership, I think, in the last class as well. I think so, right? Okay. So core skills in management, problem solving, and decision making. These are the, like, basically the most important skills is what they are saying. Okay, can we have someone to read? Okay, so they are talking about basically here leadership, how people who are at leadership positions like managers and everything, how they deal with day-to-day problems. So it says much of what managers and supervisors do is solve problems and make decisions. So this is a part of their everyday job. They have to make decisions when you're sitting in a managerial position. Even tomorrow, if you become, I will take an example of cabin crew because you all aspire to be that. Tomorrow, when you're promoted after you become a cabin crew, you will be heading a flight of, say, 5 flight attendants, or even if it's a bigger aircraft, 10 to 15 flight attendants. Okay, so then you will be the one taking the decisions. There will be a set of rules, but see, and especially when you're working in an environment where things can change because it's all related to people, everything is not followed like robots. You know, you will have a different situation every day. So as a manager, it will be your duty to make decisions. So these are the qualities that you need in a manager, and to become a good manager, you should be good at these things. Okay. So new managers and supervisors in particular often solve problems and decisions by reacting to them. They are under the gun, stressed, and very short at time. So they are the ones who will be taking decisions, and they will always be stressed. And because all these things were always very time bound, so you will see them, probably they will push you to do better. They will tell you, no, you have to finish this within this time, because they are also stressed because they are answerable to somebody else. Consequently, when they encounter new problem or decision, they react with the decision that seemed to work before. It's easy with this approach to get stuck in a circle of solving the same problem and over again. Therefore, as a new manager or supervisor, get used to an organized approach to problem solving and decision making. So it often happens that you, as a manager, face the same problem again and again a few times. So you learn from experiences, right? So probably this is my first encounter with a particular kind of a problem. So this time I will be more hassled, I will come to a decision. But next time when the same situation arises, I will know, well, what worked last time? Did the approach that we used last time, did it work or did it not work? If that approach worked, I will not take time, and the solution will be easier for me this time. Okay? And if I know that what I tried last time did not work for me, I will not waste my time doing that. Right? So this time I will be a little more composed, and it will be easier for me to take a decision. Therefore, as a new manager's supervisor, you get used to organizing. So you become more used to this with time. Basically, you become more organized. Not all problems can be solved and decisions made by the following rather rational approach. However, the following basic guidelines will get you started. Don't be intimidated by the length of the list of guidelines. After you've practiced them a few times, they'll become second nature to you. Okay, so they've given a list of problem solving ways, but this is not a solution for every problem in your life, right? But this is just a guideline which will help you to get started. And once you start practicing this every day, you will not have to refer to it. It will just become a part of your personality. So in the beginning, you will have to make an effort of, thinking, okay, probably I can use this way here. In the beginning, it's going to be like that. But once you start practicing in this in your everyday life, it becomes a second nature of you. Basically, it comes naturally to you then, okay? After you've done this a few times. So first is define the problem. Okay, so can we have Priyanka please read this?
Defining the problem with input from yourself and others. Ask yourself and others the following questions. A. What can you see that causes you think that there's a problem? B. Where is it happening? C. How is it happening? D. When is it happening? E. With whom is it happening? Hence, don't jump to who is causing the problem. When we are stressed, blaming is often one of our first reactions. To be an effective manager, you need to address issues more than people. F. Why is it happening? G. Write down a 5-sentence description of the problem in terms of the following should be happening but isn't, or the following is happening and shouldn't be. As much as possible, be specific in your own description, including what is happening, where, how, with whom, and why. It may be helpful at this point to use a variety of research methods. C.
Okay, fine. So the first way of approaching the problem, basically, they are saying you have to define the problem. Until you don't know what the problem is, you will not be able to work on it. So it says this is often where people struggle. So this is the most difficult part. We may not realize this, but until you are aware of the right problem, the decision will never be right. Okay, so they react to what they think the problem is. Instead, seek to understand more about why you think there's a problem. Okay, so often people will struggle with this. They will concentrate too much on what the problem is, but they will not think why there is a problem. Until you go to the root cause of the problem, you will not solve it. You will not have the right solution for it. Okay, so defining the problem with input from yourself and others. So always include other people in. The more perspectives you have, the more brains you have into the problem solving, you will get different ideas. Okay, and if you're doing it alone, you will only have one perception. So if I see this part of the coin, I don't know what the other person thinks, right? So I will not be able to understand the problem completely. So ask yourself and others the following questions: what you can see that causes you to think there's a problem. So all these things are questions that you ask while recognizing the problem. When, what, how, where. So all these questions you should ask yourself. And point G says, write down a 5-sentence description of the problem in terms of the following should be happening but isn't, or the following is happening and should be this. This is happening, but this should be happening. As much as possible, be specific in your description, including what is happening, where, how, and whom. So basically, these are the questions that you should be asking. Then defining complex problems. If the problem still seems overwhelming, break it down by repeating steps A to F until you have description of several related problems. Okay, so again, if you still feel, okay, I've done everything, I've done all this, what, where, how, when, everything I've done, but it still doesn't seem to work. So then you have to, and you still feel like, okay, I can't do this. You're still under so much of stress. Then you have to break it down by repeating the steps. Sometimes what happens is, when you do one thing and you do it all over again, a different idea pops up. You understand the new perspective of looking at that problem. Okay, working going to happen. So the next time you break it up again and you go through the same problem solving hierarchy, A, B, C, D. Follow the same steps again until you have. And this information, verifying your understanding of the problems. It helps a great to verify your analysis, confirm with a peer or someone else. So again, if you have somebody else that you can bring with you to solve the problem, it always helps. It will give you a different perspective. Prioritize the problems. If you discover that you are looking at several related problems, then prioritize which one you should address first. Okay, this is very important, even like your day-to-day life. Sometimes what some people do is when there are a lot of problems, they concentrate on the least important one first because that seems the easiest. But you have to really prioritize what is more important for me right now. Okay, see, as a cabin crew, I will give you examples of what happens on board. Okay, sometimes you have a medical emergency and there's another passenger who is crying about, I didn't get the meal that I wanted, and making a bigger fuss. And this medical emergency, probably the person is not shouting, so your attention will go to that person who's shouting about the meal or his seat or any other reason related to service. Okay, but you have to prioritize here what is more important. I can let this passenger be upset for the moment, who is upset for the meal or his seat. It's okay. But if I don't put in my attention for the medical emergency, this can lead to a bigger problem. So you have to prioritize at all times what is more important for you to handle. And then you can go to the next one. Sometimes what happens is when you're solving the most important thing, the other things, anyways, it's a part of that and just weighs down or just like solves with that. So you have to prioritize what is important. Then B is note the difference between important and urgent problems. Often what we consider to be important problems to consider are really just urgent problems. Important problems deserve more attention. For example, if you are continually answering urgent phone calls, then you've probably got a more important problem, and that's to design a system that screens and prioritize your phone calls. So basically, you have to decide what is important and what is urgent, time bound. Often, what you consider to be important problems are really just urgent problems. So, what is more important? You have to concentrate on that for the longer run. Don't concentrate on what is more urgent, like time bound. What is more important in the longer run? And it really depends on the job role that you're doing, and you learn this with time. So what is more important is basically you should focus on that. Understand your role in the problem. Your role in the problem can greatly influence how you perceive the role of others. For example, if you are very stressed out, it'll probably look like others are too, or you may resort too quickly to blaming and reprimanding others, or you feel very guilty about your role in the problem. You may ignore the accountabilities of others. So always like, okay, you've done all the steps of defining the problem, you found out what the problem is, then you prioritize, and you always understand what is your role in the problem. When we are stressed, it's very easy, we push the blame onto someone else. But if we are all humans, we will make mistakes. And sometimes just because we are superior position-wise, we don't want to accept that it was my mistake. So understanding your role, what your role was in the problem, that is very, very important. And sometimes just because of the stress of the problem, we just bring it out on our employees, or, suppose if I'm stressed because of something that's happened, if I reprimand all of you, that is not right. Okay. So we need to understand what was my role in this problem, and not take it out or blame it on others, which is the easy way out. Okay, I cannot move that screen. Just a second. Okay, so then can we have Shruti V? Can you read from here now?
Look at the potential causes for the problem. A, it's amazing how much you don't know about what you don't know. Therefore, in this phase, it's critical to get input from other people who notice this problem and who are affected by it. B, it's often useful to collect input from other individuals one at a time, at least at first. Otherwise, people tend to be inhibited about offering their impression of the real cause of problems. C, write down what your opinions and what you have heard from others. B. Regarding what you think might be performance problem associated with an employee, it's often useful to seek advice from a peer, or your
Peer.
peer or your supervisor in order to verify your impression of the problem. E. Write down a description of the cause of the problem and in terms of what is happening, where, when, how, with whom, and why.
Okay, so this is the second point. First was we've identified the problem. Second is look at potential causes of the problem. So they've added like 5 points, but all in all, it just means that you take input from others. Okay, we've already spoken about this because more perceptions give you more ideas. Probably there are things that you've not even thought of, but somebody else thinks of that, and so you will have more inputs. And then take these inputs individually from everybody, because sometimes people have inhibitions. They don't like to bring up this in front of everybody, but individually, if you approach everybody, they will all tell you what they are feeling and probably the causes of the problem are. Okay, do that, and if you once you and keep writing it down, put in your opinion, and then you also write down what others are telling you, and then also confirm this with one of your peer, like one of your supervisors, somebody who's above you. Confirm the same thing with them. Say, this is what I have and this is what I feel, and then ask him, what do you feel, so that you have another confirmation. Basically, yes, I'm on the right way, I'm on the right path. Write down a description of the cause of the problem, and in terms of what is happening, where, when. Again, write down the same question: where, when, how, who, all that. Okay. Then is the third: identify alternatives for approaches to resolve the problem. Bibita, can you read that, please, if you have the module? Okay, I don't know why you are logged in and you cannot hear me. I don't know if this is a technical issue or people are not present in the class and they've just logged in. I want you all to understand, I'm telling you to read because this is going to help you, right? I can read it and I can just get over with the class, but I am telling you all to read because this will help you in public speaking and also in your pronunciation and talking, everything. So I want you all to feel good about reading. Make mistakes here. This is better than making mistakes in the interview, right? You rather make mistakes here. Okay, so please, I want you all to volunteer and say, I want to read today. But if you don't do that, I'm anyways going to tell you who's going to read next. Okay, so Vipin, are you there? Did I ask Vipin already? I don't know. Vipin?
Ma'am, I don't have the module.
Okay, you also. Tiana?
Ma'am, I don't have the module.
Okay, then Sneha, you already read, right? Or I'm not sure. You did not? Okay. And Sneha, your camera is not on? Okay, now it's on. Yes. Please, can you read the third point?
Yes, ma'am. Third, identity alternatives for approaches. Identify alternatives for approaches to resolve the problem. At this point, it's useful to keep others involved in bracket unless you are facing a personal and or employee performance problem. Brainstorm for solution to the problem. Very simply put, brainstorming is collecting as many ideas as possible, then screening them to find the best idea. It's critical when collecting the ideas to not pass any judgment on the ideas. Just write them down as you hear them. A wonderful set of skills used to identify the underlying cause of issues is systems thinking.
Okay, fine. So third is, that's it. Thank you. Okay, so then is identifying alternatives for approaches to resolve the problem. So we've identified, we know the causes of the problems. Now we look for other things, how we can resolve the problem. So at this point also, it is important to keep everybody involved. So basically, you're trying to resolve this, get to a solution of the problem. So one of the best techniques for problem solving is brainstorming. What is brainstorming? Is basically whatever idea comes to your mind, you write it down. If we are group of 5 people, we all get together and we brainstorm. Okay, this can be done. This, you don't judge any solution, or you don't say no, this is not going to work, or this will really work well. You just, whatever comes to your mind, whatever solution comes to your mind, you just write it down. Keep writing it down. Okay, keep writing. That is your brainstorming. So you are looking for alternatives, how to solve this problem. You are looking at different ways of solving the problem. And this is one of the ways a lot of people use for a lot of different things, from day to day, to even to solve day-to-day problems, their official problems, their personal. When you're starting up a business, when you want some ideas on something, brainstorming is one of the very effective ways. Okay. Then the fourth is select an approach to resolve the problem. Somebody wants to read? Yes, please. Good. Your name is Sony, right? Because you logged in from the company. I cannot see your name. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, thank you. So this is the fourth. Now we have the ideas that we should be using for problem solving. We've penned it down. We've written all the ideas. Now we select one of the ideas how we should resolve this problem. So for this, we when selecting the best approach, consider which approach is the most likely to solve the problem. So we have a lot of ideas now because we've brainstormed, we've written all of them down. Now we see if we are solving the pollution. Pollution. If we are solving the problem, is it going to be long term? Will it help me in the long term? If it is going to help me only today and tomorrow I'm faced with the same problem again, then it doesn't make sense that we put in so much of time, we invest so much time and energy and probably funds to solve this problem just temporarily, right? So you want a long-term solution. So you see which way is working for you in the long term. Then is which approach is the most realistic to accomplish for now. Do you have the resources and how affordable they are? Do you have enough time to implement this approach? So these are other factors that you should consider. Is, do you have the funds? Do you have the time? Do you think, do you have the resources? And do you have the money for those resources, basically? So these are other things that you should consider. And what is the extent of risk associated with each alternative? So whenever you solve a problem, there's always some kind of risk associated with it. Every problem solving, every solution will have certain risk. But then you weigh which is the idea which has the least risk, or is the risk higher than the solution, or it is lesser than the solution. What is, you just weigh the solution and the risk, right? And then you come to a decision. So 5, plan the implementation of the best alternative. This is your action plan. So now you've shortlisted, this is what we are going to do. Plan A, B, C, D, we choose plan C, suppose. Okay. So now you plan how will I implement? Don't just go ahead and do it. First, plan how you will do it. A, carefully consider what will the situation look like when the problem is solved. So you try and see basically, after I do this, will the problem be solved, or what will the situation be basically after I implement this plan? What steps should be taken to implement the best alternative to solving the problem? What systems or processes should be changed in your organization? For example, a new policy or procedure. Don't resort to solutions where someone is just going to try harder. So then you see, if I use this and I change, see, when lawmakers, they make new laws, they see everything. How will it help? And what are the risks involved? So you have to do basically a proper research. How will this help me? How will this solve the problem? Then how will you know if the steps are being followed or not? Again, there should be a way that if you're implementing something, there should be a way that you can check whether it's being done or not, right? If you don't have any idea what's happening, you don't know if everything is going by your plan, if there is no way to find that out, then everything can be a mess, right? By the end, because there's no way to follow up. So there should always be a way to follow up in between. When you start implementing, there should be a way that you know what is happening. What resources will you need in terms of people, money, and facilities, right? You need to know what resources you would need, how much money you have to spend, how many people you would need. How much time will you need to implement the solution? Again, how much time? Write a schedule that includes the start and stop times and when you expect to see certain indicators of success. So you have to make a proper plan. Okay, just a second. Okay, so you make a proper plan, like how many people, resources, time, all that. Okay, how much time will you need? Okay, who will primarily be responsible for ensuring implementation of the plan? Then you hold someone responsible of that plan. Okay, you make someone responsible of the plan. Suppose I tell you, you all have to do this assignment, and I say, okay, Sky, you are responsible to make sure that everybody has completed the assignment. Okay. Write down the answers to the above questions and consider this as your action plan. So once all these things are done, you write all this down. I need so many people. I need so much money. I need to change the policy from this to this. So when you write all these points, this becomes your action plan. This is what you will do, and this is how you will do. You write the steps according to it's supposed to be done. Okay. So if I have to do this first, this second, this third, this fourth. So this is your action plan. Then is monitor implementation of the plan. Now you've made a plan. Now you monitor the indication, monitor the implementation, that how it's being implemented. Monitor the indicators of success. Are you seeing what you would expect from the indicators? Will the plan be done according to the schedule? If the plan is not being followed as expected, then consider, was the plan realistic? Are there sufficient resources to accomplish the plan or schedule? Should more priority be placed on various aspects of the plan? Should the plan be changed? Okay, so now you start implementing the plan. You start at point 1, point 2, point 3. And then you have to monitor all this. You cannot just say, Acha, keep doing this. If I'm taking your course, I can't just tell you, okay, I just go on reading, and we are done with the 6 months course, for example. In between, I have to monitor your progress, right? So whatever plan I've made for your course, I have to keep monitoring your progress during the course, right? So, and then I have to see, am I seeing what I had thought of? Are the results showing already? If I had made after 1 month, this is what I'm looking at. So you have to, after 1 month, I have to cross-check that the results that I was expecting, are those results showing? Will the plan be done according to this schedule? So if I have a schedule to complete so and so much in 3 months, am I doing that on time? Is the course going according to the schedule? If the plan is not being followed as expected, then consider was the plan realistic? So all this you have to consider while the plan is being implemented. If you think of this at the end of the plan, then you've already wasted so much of time if it doesn't work, right? So you have to think of all this while the plan is going on. Then is 7th, verify if the problem has been resolved or not. One of the best ways to verify if a problem has been solved or not is to resume normal operations in the organization. So then we've made a plan, we've implemented the plan. So now the last point is verify if the problem has been resolved or not. Okay, one of the best ways to verify if the problem has been solved or not is to resume normal operations in the organization. Still, you should consider what changes should be made to avoid this type of problem in the future. Consider changes to policies and procedures, training, etc. Lastly, consider what did you learn from this problem solving. Consider new knowledge, understanding, or skills. Consider writing a brief memo that highlights the success of the problem solving effort and what you learned as a result. Share it with your supervisor, peers, and subordinates. Okay. So now we've implemented, everything is done now. After everything is done, we go back to how we used to work, right? But we also consider that if what problem we've solved, it should not happen in the future. If we should not face the same problems in future, because there's so much time, energy, resources that are involved. We don't want to keep spending our resources on that again and again, right? So we see what changes would be required so that we don't face the same problems again. Then you also consider what did you learn from this experience, your learnings. You always, when you do something, always consider to pay attention on the learning that you got from that. Okay, that should not, you've experienced, that experience is always with you. What you have to take with you is also the learning from that experience. Okay, then also consider writing a brief memo. So then you make like a small report about what happened. This was the problem, this is what we did, so many people were involved, this is the solution, we are happy with the solution, or it worked, it wasn't so well, but we can do this next time. So just make basically a complete report about what was done, and then you can present it to the supervisor if that's needed. Okay, so then we will read something more about leadership, like what is leadership and all definitions. So I'm sure there are a lot of definition of leadership. Everybody defines it in a different way. So who's going to read now? Mehak is done, Leku is done. Yes. Who's this? Is this Sony? Okay, I just want people who've not read to do it. Sony, if nobody's, but I think a lot of people have read already, but we can start repeating then if nobody wants to volunteer. Okay. Raheem, Sakshi. Sakshi, have you read already? Societal goals. Okay. Yeah, thank you. So basically, there are different people have described leadership, right, in different ways. So these are different definitions of leadership. Process of social influence in which one person can enlist the aid and support of others in the accomplishment of a common task. So basically, one person is the leader and everybody else is there. You include everybody else towards a common task. Okay. Then there's another one which says by Alan Keith, leadership is ultimately about creating a way for people to contribute to making something extraordinary happen. So you are the leader, you will make a way, a path, you will lay the path, right? For everybody else who's included in that to do something extraordinary, basically to do something they know of, probably they're good at, but to achieve an extraordinary goal, okay? Then there's another one by Ken Ogbonia. Effective leadership is the ability to successfully integrate and maximize available resources within the internal and external environment for the attainment of organizational or societal goals. So this also says how you use your resources to attain a goal that is set by your organization or by your society, or if it is your own goal. So these are the different definitions. Leadership remains one of the most relevant aspects of the organizational context. However, defining leadership has been challenging and definitions can vary depending on the situation. According to Anne-Marie E. McSwain, assistant professor at Lincoln University, leadership is about capacity. The capacity of leaders to listen and observe, to use their expertise as a starting point to encourage dialogue between all levels of decision making, to establish processes and transparency in decision making, to articulate their own values and visions clearly, but not impose them. Leadership is about setting and not just reacting to agendas, identifying problems and initiating change that makes for substantial improvement rather than managing change. Okay, so these are all different. So another professor has also described leadership. So this, according to this description, it is the capacity of a leader, of a person, to listen and observe. And they also use their expertise, what they are good at, to encourage others, okay, to lead a way for them. Not only listen to what's happening in the organization, but also to give ideas, to make a project, work on it yourself, right? Not just, and you should have your own values set, your own vision. So these are all things that as a leader, a person would do. They should encourage other members of the team to do their best and lay out a vision or a goal for them. Not just, so you have to lead by example. When you do things, your teammates will see you that if the leader is working so much, there is a sense of responsibility and there's a sense of that, okay, I am going to do my best, right? So you have to lead by example. The following sections discuss several important aspects of leadership, including a description of what leadership is and a description of several popular theories and styles of leadership. This article also discusses topics such as the role of emotions and vision, as well as leadership effectiveness and performance. Leadership in different contexts, how it may differ from related concepts, that is management, and some critiques of leadership are generally conceived. Okay, so they're talking about different aspects related to leadership. What are the different types? What are what are the different ways of being a good leader, and all that. So the top leadership qualities they're talking about. First, okay, leadership can be defined as one's ability to get others to willingly follow, right? So you have to convince others in the team to follow what your goal is, right? You should have this ability to to make you believe that this is what we are supposed to do. Because until you believe in a task, you will not give you 100%, right? Every organization needs leaders at entry level. Leaders can be found and nurtured if you look for the following character traits. A leader with vision has a clear, vivid picture and where to go, as well as a firm grasp on what success looks like and how to achieve it. But it's not enough to have a vision. Leaders must also share it and act upon it. Jack Welch, former chairman and CEO of General Electric Company, said, "Good business leaders create a vision, articulate the vision, passionately own the vision, and relentlessly drive in the completion." So basically, a good leader should not only have the vision, but should also know how to convince, how to implement at all the stages. Okay? A leader must be able to communicate his or her vision in terms that cause followers to buy into it. So I have an idea. If I cannot communicate the same idea to you, I can never convince you to believe it, right? So a good leader should always have good communication capabilities. He or she must communicate clearly and passionately, as passion is contagious. So if you are passionate about a project, your passion will show in your work. When you're trying to communicate your plan or your vision to others, others will be able to sense the passion that you have behind the project. Okay? And they say passion is contagious. People, if I am really passionate about something and you are my team working on it, you will also feel some passion for that project, right? A good leader must have the discipline to work toward his or her vision single-mindedly, as well as to direct his or her actions and those of the team toward the goal. Action is the mark of a leader. A leader does not suffer analysis paralysis, but is always doing something in pursuit of the vision, inspiring others to do the same. So you lead by example is basically what you do it, and you inspire others to do the same. Okay? So then they're talking about the 10 qualities that a leader should have. First is integrity. Someone wants to read? Or is it better this way?
Ma'am, I can read it.
Go ahead, please. You start with, yeah.
Is the integration of outward actions and inner values. A person of integrity is the same on the outside and inside. Such an individual can be trusted because he or she never veers from inner values, even when it might be expeditious to do so. A leader must have the trust of followers and therefore must display integrity. Honest dealings, predictable reactions, well controlled emotions, and an absence of tantrums and harsh outbursts are always signs of integrity. A leader who is centered in integrity will be more approachable by the followers.
Okay, thank you. So first quality they're talking about is integrity. Integrity, what is integrity? Is basically your principles and values. You do not you don't show to be someone else, and from the inside you have other things which are not very pleasant. Okay, you might there are always people in your work culture, in your school, everywhere, who will be very nice to the teacher or their boss because they know this will help them, but from inside they're only doing it for their benefits, right? But integrity is something that you have your values and principles and you don't let it go just because you will benefit out of that, right? So that is a very important, people might not realize this on a short term, but it goes a long way in your life. Okay, especially when you're working for an organization, or if you have your own business tomorrow, integrity is very important, because somebody might not be able to judge you, but when you're working with the same person for a long time, people will get to know you better, and they will understand, is this person doing this only for their own selfish reasons, or does he really mean that? Okay, so integrity is basically your inner values and principles of being honest or being hardworking. Okay, so second is dedication. Somebody wants to read? No one?
Can I read it again?
May I?
Okay, so Sky will give Angom a chance now. Okay, Angom, go ahead.
Yeah, dedication. Dedication means spending whatever time or energy is necessary to accomplish the tasks at hand. A leader inspires dedication by example, doing whatever it takes to complete the next step toward the vision. By setting an excellent example, leaders can show followers that there are no 9 to 5 jobs on the team, only opportunities to achieve something great.
Okay, that's it. Thank you. So the second point is dedication. So how dedicated are you towards the task at hand? Especially if you are a leader, you really have to show your dedication. You cannot expect everybody else to do work and not work yourself, right? If you are not true to your task, others will not follow. If I am coming late to the class every day and I expect you to be there on time, that is not right. Okay, if I tell you to follow a certain things for this course and I am doing the opposite of that, that is not right, and you will not follow that, because I, being not a leader, but this is just an example. Okay, you will not follow that. You will also do what you want to do, right? Because I am not being dedicated towards this class. I am not dedicated. If I'm not reading up I'm not prepared for the class, you will also do the same. So I, as a leader, should show dedication for the team to follow. Okay? And it can always not be in black and white. Okay, this will be today, tomorrow. There are always changes, and you have to live up to those changes. Okay, you have to basically change as per the situation and be ready. Go-getter, be a go-getter. Like, do everything that you can do in your what is possible for you. Okay, then is magnanimity. Okay, Sky, you can go ahead now.
Yes, ma'am. Magnanimity means giving credit where it is due. A magnanimous leader ensures that credit for successes is spread as widely as possible throughout the company. Conversely, a leader takes personal responsibility for failures. This sort of reverse magnanimity helps other people feel good about themselves and draws the team closer together to spread the fame and take the blame in hallmark of effective leadership.
Okay. Okay, that's it. So the next point is magnanimity, which means you should appreciate basically where people need to be appreciated. You cannot ignore the good work that your team is putting in. So you have to make sure that they are motivated towards the task by you acknowledging their good work. Okay? So give them the due respect or the due credit of what they've done. At the same time, if you are leading a task, you should also be able to say that, okay, this has been done, and I take the blame for this. I am ready to, as a leader, this is my mistake, or probably I take the responsibility for this. What this does is people around you will be they will become closer as a team. And this will obviously help in the overall working of the team. Right? Then is leaders with humility. So being humble is another quality that a leader should have. So leaders with humility recognize that there are no better or worse than other members of the team. A humble leader is not self-efficacious, but rather tries to elevate everyone. Leaders with humility also understand that the status does not make them a god. Mahatma Gandhi is a role model for Indian leaders, and we pursued a follower-centric leadership role. So another quality is humility. So you have to be humble. You cannot say, being humble doesn't mean that you diminish yourself. Okay, you don't become less self-worth. You know what you are, but you don't have to use that position saying that I know I am a superior, and just because of that I have so and so privileges over all the others. Okay, so you have to remember that the members of the team are equally important as you are. And one of the example is Mahatma Gandhi, who led a very big revolution, but he never thought of him as the leader. Okay, he followed with his followers. He did what he asked others to do. Then is openness. Openness means being able to listen to new ideas, even if they do not conform to the usual way of thinking. Good leaders are able to suspend judgment while listening to others' ideas, as well as accept new ways of doing things that someone else thought of. Openness builds mutual respect and trust between leaders and followers, and it also keeps the team well supplied with new ideas that can further its vision. So then is being open about to new ideas, and giving them the credit is also part of that, because you are a magnanimous leader. Okay, so openness and magnanimity can go hand in hand. Just because someone is a leader, you cannot shut everybody else, right? First of all, this will never help you in working with new ways, because you are the only one taking decision. So there are no new perspectives. There are no new ideas coming, right? So you should be open to taking ideas from the team. Okay. Then is creativity is the ability to think differently, to get outside of the box that constrains solutions. Creativity gives leaders the ability to see things that others have not seen, and thus leaders follows in new directions. The most important question that a leader can ask is, what is possibly the worst thing a leader can say is, I know this is a dumb question. Okay, so you have to be creative in your ways of whether it's problem solving, whether it's a new project, or it is dealing with the employees, it is whatever. You have to be creative in your ways. Then is fairness. Fairness means dealing with others consistently and justly. A leader must check all the facts and hear everyone out before passing judgment. He or she must avoid leaping to conclusions based on incomplete evidence. When people feel they are being treated fairly, they reward a leader with loyalty and dedication. So another point is being fair to everybody. You should not have favorites in your team, always support, neglecting mistakes of certain people and always pointing a finger at the others, because this will always create a drift between the team members, right? So you have to be fair. And when you're fair and you you always make informed decisions, you see what's happening, and only then you come to a conclusion, which is very important. This will help you in being, for some time, maybe somebody gets offended because you've told them this is your mistake. But in the longer run, your team members will also see, no, this was fair. And when they see that the leader is fair, they will be more loyal towards you, right? They'll be more disciplined, they'll work harder, because they know there is no favoritism happening here. If I work, I will get the reward for this. Okay? Then is assertiveness is not the same as aggressiveness. Rather, it is the ability to clearly state that one expects, so that there will be no misunderstandings. A leader must be assertive to get the desired results. Along with assertiveness comes the responsibility to clearly understand what followers expect from the leader. Many leaders have difficulty striking the right amount of assertiveness. According to a study in the February 2007 issue of the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, published by APA, American Psychology Association, it seems that being under-assertive or over-assertive may be the most common weakness amongst aspiring leaders. So until now, we spoke about all the nice and qualities that the team members will like you have to give everybody the credit, you have to be fair, you have to have all new ideas, be open to others' ideas. But another very important aspect of being a good leader is that you have to be assertive, which means you need you don't have to be strict or aggressive with the team, but you just have to make sure that what has to be done, you have to, as a leader, you have to make sure that that is done. You can't just let your team or your employees take you for granted. Just because I'm nice, I'm modest, I'm giving you the credit for your good work, I'm being fair, doesn't mean that you take me for a ride. Okay, so you have to be assertive so that you can communicate what is happening, and this is how it is going to happen, and this is the result I'm looking at, and this is what you're supposed to do. So there should be, and this is apparently, they did a study and they said this is one of the most this is one of the quality which is a weakness in a lot of leaders, being assertive. Okay, and there's a difference between being assertive and being aggressive. Aggressive is just, I'm just always very I'm always shouting, and I'm always angry. That is not being assertive. You can be assertive, you can still be composed and calm. Okay, so you understand the difference between being assertive and being aggressive, right? Okay, and then there is a sense of humor is vital for to relieve tension and boredom, as well as to diffuse hostility. Effective leaders know how to use humor to energize followers. Humor is a form of power that provides some control over the work environment, and simply put, humor fosters good camaraderie. So humor is very important in every aspect of life, whether it's your work, personal, relationship, anything. You need to laugh. Okay, and if you don't laugh, people will get bored and people will stop paying attention, which happens in a lot of classes. Yeah, people are sleeping with their eyes open. We've all done that in class, especially history class. No? So then a sense of humor is equally important. Okay, because that kind of builds a little friendship between the leader and the team, and that is good. That is always healthy. Laughing is always a good thing. Okay, so laugh, smile in any situation. Intrinsic traits such as intelligence, good looks, height, and so on are not necessary to become leader. Anyone can cultivate the proper leadership traits. So these are certain qualities that they've given, around 10 qualities, which makes a good leader. Okay, and then there are things that other people think, like height or good looks could be qualities that that make a good leader, but honestly, that is not people are looking for a good leader. Okay, you need other things are much more important than that. Fine. How much time do we have? Okay, so I think we'll stop here, because then we keep the last 15 minutes for a question and answer round, whether it is from today's module that we did, or you have any questions about aviation or like anything. You want to know something about airlines, how it works and all that. I'm an instructor, but I'm not Google, so I might not have answers to everything, but I will try and find out things that I don't know. Okay, but I've been in the industry for a very long time, so there will be a lot of experiences that I've made, okay, in 15 years. So go ahead. If you have any questions, I am open to that. And if you have any feedback for me, I would love that also, because that will help me improve on things. Okay? So anybody?
Ma'am, could you explain magnanimous, please?
Okay, yes, I can do that. So what is magnanimous personality is basically someone who doesn't shy away from giving credit where it's needed. Okay, when you are, what magnanimity means is that, how do I explain in easy words? Basically, you have a magnanimous heart of appreciating others for the work. You don't shy away from that. Okay, if my team member has done a good thing, I will not take credit as a leader. I will appreciate. I'll make sure that they get the due respect and the credit that they deserve. Okay, does that help?
Yeah, that did help.
Okay, perfect. I can also read what is written here and explain it. Magnanimity means giving credit where it is due. A magnanimous leader ensures that credit for success is spread as widely as possible throughout the company. Conversely, a good leader takes personal responsibility for failures. This sort of reverse magnanimity helps others feel good about themselves to spread the fame and take the blame in a hallmark way. Yeah, that is what it says basically. Giving credit and also being responsible if something goes wrong in your work or in your team. Okay, so you as a leader should feel responsible and take the responsibility for that. Okay. Okay, anybody else? Nobody? You don't want to know anything about the job, about aviation? I thought you would have a lot of questions.
Is studying Hindi important? I'm too.
Studying Hindi. Okay, yes. So what happens is tomorrow, if you become a cabin crew in any of the Indian carriers, basically you have to make Hindi announcements. Okay. If tomorrow, okay, as a crew you might not have to, but once you become a purser or once you get promoted to cabin crew in charge, you will have to make announcements, and that will be in English and Hindi both. And also, if you join a foreign airline, not all the airlines, but some of the airlines, you are there as a language speaker. And in India, not everybody speaks in Hindi, but they expect you to know Hindi because you will be communicating. And some airlines also have, like in Lufthansa where I work, we used to make regional announcements to the country that you're flying to. So we as Indian crew on board, we would make the Hindi announcements. Okay, so it will be needed, and some airlines will test you on that. Just regular talking. So you don't have to be like an expert, and because we don't, even though I'm Hindi speaking day to day, we don't use like Shuddh Hindi, we don't use like very specific Hindi words. There are words which is a mix of Hindi and English. Like school is used as school, right? We don't use Pathshala or something. Okay, so basically they need talking English. So you might have to, because I know a lot of you are from down south and you don't speak Hindi there at all, but I would suggest you start listening to Hindi, maybe just watch Bollywood movies and just try and talk in Hindi as much as you can. English is important, but Hindi is also important. Okay?
Thank you for the knowledge.
You're welcome. Yes. Yes, go ahead. Boarding to departure. So only from the starting of the flight, you mean? Okay, so every airline will have they will train you really well. So you are not when you go for an interview, you are not expected to know in and out of the industry, because every airline is going to prepare you for the task. Okay, basically what you're supposed to do is when you board the flight, you are supposed to check the aircraft from inside, all the emergency equipment you have, like the firefighting equipments, or you have the oxygen cylinder, or you have the flashlights, you have the life vest. So you're supposed to check all that. You are, as per your position where you're working, you will be told these are the things that you are supposed to check. So you have to make sure that the equipment's are in working condition. It is there. No extra thing is there, because you don't want people to plant things that don't belong to the aircraft, because it can be dangerous, right? Then there will be things, if you're working in a full service airline, there will be a lot of service preparations that you will do on ground. Not only for the on-ground services, but you prepare something even for the services that are done in air. So you will know when you start working, you'll know, okay, this is you will just at the back, it will be at the back of your hand. You get on the aircraft and you will just start working. It will come with time, but it will. Okay, so you'll probably start working for your services, preparing for the services. Then the boarding will be announced. And then the passengers, you greet the passengers, help them where help is needed, and then you will basically close doors, arm doors, all that. And some airlines expect you to do the manual safety demo, and some have the recorded one. So depending on that, you'll have to do that. And before takeoff, you have to secure the cabin, which means basically you have to make sure all the safety aspects are followed, like the seatbelts are fastened, nobody's using the cell phone, everybody's listened to the safety demo, and nothing is unsecured in the galley, washrooms are empty, all that. But all this will be taught to you, and then you take off, and then the rest of the services start in air. Okay. No problem.
Ma'am, can you explain about your interview experience?
Okay. So it's been a very, very long time that I gave my cabin crew interviews, which was back in 2007 when I started with Kingfisher, 2006 rather, when I appeared for the interviews. See, every airline, I think I said this, and I will say this every time, has a completely different way of shortlisting candidates. But there are certain things, what they are looking for is how well you communicate, and they're looking for your problem. They might not give you like a written exam, but they are looking at you for your problem solving capabilities. How well can you deal with problems? How well can you deal with people? You're not dealing with machines, so you have to be very empathetic, and you have to show that. Okay, they expect you to be nervous. Don't think, okay, I'm so nervous. Everybody is nervous. Even if today I go for I've been working for 15 years now, but if today I have to appear for an interview, I might not be as nervous as I was back in like 2006, but there will be some nervousness, right? So they expect that. Don't think you will overcome that nervousness, or I'll goof up. Just try to keep that under control. It should not affect your talking in a major way. Okay, they know you are all freshers and you're all young, and this is probably the first time you're facing an interview, so all that is expected. Okay, some airlines have written exams testing your English or your problem solving. Some have group discussions, some have only face to face. So it depends on the airline that you're appearing for. How well are you dressed? Your grooming is very, very, very important. Don't go like overly with a face of like pink and purple and yellow eyeshadows, and they want basic decent makeup, but they want that. Okay, your hair is proper, your uniform is proper, all that is very important. Your presentation basically is very, very important, especially in the airline industry, like all of you know that, right? But you will learn that in the next whatever months you have for this training. That is why we are here. Okay? Okay. Anything else? Do you all have any like a dream airline you all want to work for?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, tell me, Sakshi.
Ma'am, it's Qatar.
Qatar, you want to work for Qatar. Okay. Anybody else? You also want to work for Qatar. Anybody else have ever thought of this? What airline you want to work for?
Etihad, ma'am.
Etihad. Okay. So it's good to know about your goal, what is your goal, but I would say never let an opportunity go. Okay, so if there are interviews after like your course, once we tell you that okay, now you're good to go for interviews, always give as many interviews as you can. Okay, once you think you are prepared for it, even if you don't want to join, that is still your decision, right? But it gives you a lot of exposure, lot of exposure, lot of experience, and it will help you great deal, believe me. Okay, so never say okay, this airline I never want to work for, so I'm not going to go for the interview. Okay, I don't think I'm ever going to join this. Go for the interview, learn that it is going to be an experience for you. Okay, and by the way, there will be a lot of airlines opening up in the next 2 or 3 years probably. And because of COVID, a lot of people say that aviation has been hit badly. It is one of the worst industries to be hit, which is also true. A lot of people lost jobs, but at the same time, it is already bouncing back. There will be a lot of job opportunities in the coming years. There are already a lot of airlines which are under talks to be opening soon. Like you already know, Jet Airways is opening again, which will be a smaller airline, not as big as it was, obviously. Then there is something called Akasa. Then there's another, I think, Flypop, which is opening from UK to India. It is a UK-based airline, but it will have operations to India. So it opens up more opportunities, right? So like this, there will be a lot of other airlines, maybe not very big airlines initially. No airline was big when they opened, right? They all started small. The good thing about small airlines is you grow with the airline. You get promoted sooner. Bigger airlines, it takes longer to get promotions, right? So as the airline grows, you also grow with it. Okay, so don't ever get worried, you know, because COVID is there, we might not get job opportunities. By the time you probably complete your courses, there will be a lot of job opportunities opening up. Okay. Anything else? No? There are some people who don't talk in the class at all, and I would want them to talk a little more, okay? Because your job requires that. Whether you're a ground staff or you are a cabin crew, you are at the ticketing counter, you are at the whatever, your job requires you to talk to people, and this is your time to do that. This is the time to learn, right? So don't think I'll say something stupid, or don't think I'll make a mistake. This is the place to make mistakes because there is someone to correct you for that, right? So do that. And I wasn't so confident back 15 years from now, right? When I started, I was also very naive. I didn't know what to say. I would always feel nervous. Should I say this? Should I not say this? But until you experiment it, you will not. Until you start talking to people publicly, you will not have that experience and confidence. Okay, so slowly, take it slowly, but work on it. Start working on it. If you're reading something, if you feel you need more, communication is the area where you want to work, start reading from newspapers or start reading from books. Record yourself. If you are shy that I don't want to read it in front of someone else, start recording yourself. Because when you record and then you listen to yourself later, you know what mistakes you're making. Just don't read it and then a good way, I think, is to record yourself, because then you can listen to your recording and then you can see what mistakes you've made. Okay, so always when you're reading, try to record yourself. Even if you don't want to share it with anyone, don't do that. That is for yourself. That is a self-learning technique. Okay, yes, I hope that helps you. And honestly, in today's time, there are so many ways that you can work on yourself. There's everything on the internet. Read about airlines, especially for people who have a dream airline. Read about the airline you want to work for. Listen to everything is on YouTube today. Listen to the interviews, cabin crew interviews. Watch these videos. You know, it'll help you. Give that. Everything cannot be taught to you in the class, right? So put in your extra time where you can utilize your time for such things. Okay, so these are just a few ways. You all can come up with your things that work for you, and I'm sure you all will be great. Okay,
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
okay, then I think we're done for today. It's 4 o'clock. I'll see you soon again then. You all have a good evening or the rest of the day. See you soon.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Have a pleasant day, ma'am.